Well, Steve, I said UConn wouldn't lose a game all season. I didn't think it was going to happen this quick against Notre Dame on Sunday here, 74-60 final. I mean, the offensive production of Azzi Fudd was absolutely missing after the injury in this game, and it was proven that the offense flows when she's on the court. It was really hurtful to see not having her on the court here. Olivia Miles was absolutely insane, 21 points to lead number 7 Notre Dame past number 3 UConn. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Slasher U. I'm your host, Christian Rao, here with my co-host, Steve Beck. We're going to break down this game between Notre Dame and UConn, 74-60 final in the Jimmy V Women's Classic on Sunday. This was a very good game, regardless of what we saw with UConn struggling towards really the entirety of this game, but especially in the second half without Azzi Fudd, Steve.
Yeah, but I mean, really, they shot themselves in the feet because they just didn't shoot well the entire game. Even with Azzi there, they didn't shoot well. They shot 36.8% from the floor.
Yeah,
now I was impressed because I thought, especially on the defensive end of the court, I thought UConn Huskies really stepped up in the third quarter. I mean, I really thought Olivia Miles kind of disappeared in that third quarter. They really were effective in shutting her down. I mean, I think she got a little flustered, I think, by the defensive pressure that was up against her. I mean, she had kind of, a kind of a silly foul, but I think that was more out of frustration as opposed to making a bad play. Games like this happen to the best of teams. My guess is it's going to happen to South Carolina. It's going to happen to Stanford. I'm putting aside the Stanford South Carolina game, putting that out of the equation. They're going to have a game like this. Iowa's already had games like this, so it's going to happen during the course of a season. You have to give credit to Notre Dame, though, because they did everything right. Home court advantage, well, sure, but when you've got teams of this caliber, I think it gets reduced, a little bit there. But I mean, they shot over 56% from the floor.
Yeah. Those fans were wild at Notre Dame, though. I will say those fans were amped. The mascot was running around. I mean, there was some really fun things to watch for Notre Dame on that aspect. But I agree. When you get to this level, I don't think there's that big of an aspect when it comes to home court advantage. I mean, there's a little bit, but I don't think the impact is as crucial as some of the other ones, maybe at a lower level of play. When you look at these teams, though, I mean, you just mentioned it just happened to UConn. It's going to happen, potentially in South Carolina. We saw it happen to Stanford, probably happen again. And then it happened to Notre Dame just the game before against Maryland, right? So, I mean, what I like about this is it shows the competitive nature of this women's season so far. And I think we are in for one of the best March Madnesses that we have probably ever seen in women's basketball, or at least in a very long time. I think that there is, right now, South Carolina is showing to be the top team right now. Now, there are some times where they're showing that they had some comeback victories. The game against UCLA was kind of tough. They show that they can be beat, right? We have seen that. It hasn't happened so far this season, but there's signs that are showing. Okay, so let's just keep that in mind for our Notre Dame and UConn fans listening into this one. Now, UConn has already had a ton of injuries, Steve, before going into this game with Dorka, with Beckers, with Brady. I mean, you can name them. And we said that we were not going to keep talking about them, but we have to bring it up again because now we see Azzi Fudd not being able to go in the second half. And what we saw in this game is that their offensive flow was very impacted by her not being in there. And I think that's what hurt them shooting from the field. It pushed Mule to be a shooter more than the passer. She's leading the nation in assists, but it made her have to shoot more. Now, granted, she looked pretty good doing that as a shooter for the majority of the time, especially in the first half. But you're missing a key piece from Azzi Fudd, who only played 13 minutes in this game. You're talking about someone who average going into this game 24 points a game. Her average dropped down, I think, 20 now after this game. I don't think that really matters to her. Her health is what's really important. I hope that we see her ready to go at least against Maryland. Not sure if we'll see her play against Princeton coming up, but at least against Maryland. That's another tough game, another nice one they need to rebound against, one who beat this Notre Dame team by 2 that they just lost to 74-60, Steve.
And I'm trying to think of how I really want to say this because we talked about potentially Connecticut's lack of depth because of the injuries at times. So in the second half, they really only had 7 healthy players available. Yet in that third quarter, what really I think affected them in the fourth quarter was that they put so much effort onto the defensive end, they did wear down, and they didn't have the players to rotate in.
Yeah.
You're right about the offensive flow. I mean, you had 3 players account for more than 75% of their total points. Senecal, Mule, and Edwards basically got 75% of their points. All 3 of them played at least 38 minutes. 2 of them played. If they had 20 players, it wouldn't be a depth problem.
Right.
2 of them, Senecal and Mule, played all 40 minutes. So again, it shows that Connecticut can survive even when they're a little bit shorthanded. This was just a night that Notre Dame just was a better basketball team this night than UConn was. I mean, yes, there was the injury. I believe today I saw a report that Auriemma is saying that Azzi is going to be playing against Princeton, because Princeton has been kind of flirting with the rankings in and out all year.
They are preseason ranked at top 25. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So I think they would like to see, she would like to get back. I think it was more of a precaution in this game. I don't want to say that Auriemma had an inkling that just wasn't their night, but sometimes coaches can sense that, and they're like, well, okay, let's err on the side of caution. We've already had a bunch of injuries, err on the side of cautions. I believe in the players we have out there in the courts. And I think they showed in that third quarter that they had the chance to get back in it, but Notre Dame just was a better team.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I do think that's the case. I think they were a better team, and we saw that. There was moments on the defensive side. We talked about the offensive flow, how that just didn't work with Fudd, but it hurt them defensively as well. They were not playing on all cylinders at all on the defensive side. There was plenty of times where Olivia Miles would just drive the lane almost uncontested, or Mabry would be wide open for a 3. There was plenty of times where that was just a struggle, and you were wondering if you were watching the third best team in the nation, or if you were watching a different team that was disguised as the Huskies. That was some problems at moments during this game. Well, you talk about, though, a lot of injuries. When they get them back, that is going to be something to keep in mind. That's going to help them. They have to get through this in order to be ready for that when that happens. They do have a tough schedule for the rest of the year. I will say it's interesting that depth problem is really something to keep in mind. They did have 8 players play in this one, including Fudd, but DeBerry only played 4 minutes in this one. So really, they only had 6 players through the rotation. You already mentioned that multiple people played the entirety of the game. Patterson and Ducharme was really the only 2 players that came off the bench with significant time. And one of them was really mainly because Fudd couldn't go. So that's something just to keep in mind. They really only had 1 true bench player play in this one. So that's something that I know that he likes to play short for the majority of the season. But if you're dealing with all these injuries, it might be something to keep in mind that you maybe want to expand if you can, right? If you can. Looking at the rest of this month for UConn, again, they play Princeton Thursday night, and then Sunday they play 20th ranked Maryland. UConn did move down to 6th in the nation after this loss, but then they play Florida State, who's 9-1. Some reason Florida State's still not ranked. I just don't understand that one. Regardless, a 9-1 team, they have some tough matchups. Then they play Seton Hall 6-3. That's their easiest matchup for the rest of the month here, a 6-3 Seton Hall. Then they play Creighton, who's been ranked all season long, 18th in the nation right now. And then they finish the year off against Marquette, who's currently 6-2 as we're speaking right now. They play 6 teams, all with winning records, and they're dealing with injuries. As we've mentioned time and time again on this show, UConn has to find a way to overcome. They have done that in almost every single aspect this year, except this one against Notre Dame. This game against Princeton is a huge rebounding moment for them, a huge gut check, if you will, to get back on the right page, Steve.
Yeah, I think they're supposed to get Urhas. I know I pronounced her name wrong. So again, in the comments, yes, I know I pronounced the name wrong, but I'm going to just say Urhas because I believe it's how it's pronounced. She has a broken thumb. She is scheduled to come back. It's going to depend on how she practices as to whether or not she's going to play against Princeton. But that would be another addition, certainly, for the game against Maryland. They're going to find a way. They know that they can't take a night off, and they certainly didn't take a night off against Notre Dame. But in order to be able to do that and sustain that all through league play. I think that they are going to have to get healthy and get healthy quick. But I mean, they're well coached. They seem to be very united. I mean, they seem to be they work as a unit. They're not, even though they have a star, they work as a unit. And I think that is going to win them a bunch of close games as they build back to health and build them back into tournament time come March. So I'm not as worried. I'm not worried about UConn.
Mm-hmm.
It is kind of funny you jinxed them, but again, teams are gonna have these kind of nights. This was my favorite basketball game of the entire weekend, men or women.
Agreed.
And I watched a bunch. This was my absolute favorite. It was the only game I watched from second one to the final buzzer. I watched it all the way through. I even watched the halftime, and I generally never watch the halftime. I watched this game all the way through. It was the most enjoyable. I think it shows that Notre Dame, by taking advantage of the transfer portal, kind of bought them some credibility and bought them some time in a quick turnaround. People thought they might be down a little bit because they lost so much last year. But I think Notre Dame's going to have to be taken seriously, throughout the year. And we need more games like this on the women's side. But you're right. This is going to be the most competitive women's bracket we've ever seen. More importantly, this is going to be the deepest and most competitive WNIT that we've ever had. And I thought last year's women's NIT was pretty good. I think the teams that get left out, by no means is it a consolation prize to be on the NIT. There are just only so many places in the women's bracket. And I think the women's NIT is going to be a fun tournament to follow start to finish as well.
Yeah, I think there's going to be two very good tournaments coming up for the women's side come March. Let us know in the comments what you think about this game between UConn and Notre Dame. Do you think it was the best game of the weekend, just like Steve thought? We both believe that this was a fantastic game. You worried about UConn? Do you think they can overcome yet again some of these more injuries? You worried about Azzi Fudd and what she can produce moving forward against Princeton and Maryland? Let us know in the comment description below. Hit like and subscribe while you're there. And thanks for always watching /U.